All right, we're in, if I can remember what chapter we're in, I have to look at Job 37. Job 22. No, I'm just. Job 37. Lord willing, we'll finish up this chapter tonight. This is Elihu's, I believe this is the last chapter that he speaks. And he's, whether he's trying to convince Job or just be heard or both, when he gets done, not a peep from him or from his three friends. But anyway, he goes on and listen, this is where it starts getting into the structure of well, we've already been into it. When we're reading this stuff, there's practical application. There's even local application to the scientific things that happen right here in our environment. But a lot of this has to do with the universe and the structure of it and where God is and how He made the thing. And you can't let that be lost on you, or you're going to have a very small estimation of God's creation. In verse 14, let's start there, because he begins a new thing here. Hearken unto this, O Job. Stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. You know, that's what folks should do. They should just stand still, consider the wondrous works of God. Just take a look around. You have no problem with people going, traveling and looking at what God created. Nothing wrong with that. Even in a fallen state, it can be absolutely magnificent. Imagine if it wasn't fallen. Imagine if God were putting energy into that thing and He were maintaining that thing, how beautiful it'd be. There wouldn't be any insects, would there? Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what can ruin a trip. Mosquitoes can ruin a trip. Ants can ruin a trip. Bears, I mean, it'd be nice if the animals didn't bite either, and the snakes didn't come around, and all that kind of thing. But he said there, consider the wondrous works of God. Dost thou know when God disposed them and caused the light of His cloud to shine? Dost thou know the balancing of the clouds and the wondrous works of Him which is perfect in knowledge? How thy garments are warm when He quieteth the earth by the south wind? Hast thou with Him spread out the sky which is strong and as a molten looking glass? And like I said, we're going to have to be careful that we don't confine this to something like our atmosphere, because he's talking about God's cloud. And we'll find out this cloud is present on His throne. So you got to be careful. And also, we're going to find out this universe is like a garment to Him. It's like He's wearing this very pitch dark cloud that shrouds Him from His creation. And there's a reason for that. All right. So, let me get ahead of my notes here. Turn to Job 28:25. There's a lot here that, maybe the scientists have, I think they've caught up with it, the meteorologists and all that. The people give you the weather. They understand what's coming. They don't understand, I don't think they understand all the dynamics of how it comes about. I don't think they could, because God's the one that controls the weather. But they can tell you what's coming based upon certain measurements. And notice he mentions there, Job 28:25, to make the weight for the winds and weigheth the waters by measure. One of those is the first one, the weight for the winds, is called barometric pressure, also known as atmospheric pressure. It describes the weight of the air surrounding the earth. That's in 1800 BC in the book of Job. And I guarantee you they didn't have any clue about that the wind had weight. And when it starts getting heavy, you know what's going to happen. It's going to rain. And then he mentions there the weight of, he weigheth the waters by measure, water pressure. Now, you would think, and I always thought that wherever you are in the water, it's all the same. No. The deeper you go, the heavier it gets. And at 20,000 feet, which is less than 4 miles, at 20,000 feet, the weight is 11,000 pounds per square inch. Can you imagine that? That's why you get down there, man, I mean, it can just crush you, just literally, you just implode because of that kind of weight against you, and it'd be against your entire body from every direction. That's incredible to me. I don't understand that, but that's just the way it is, But the Bible's talking about that. In the oldest book in the Bible, it's talking about it. And I think that's just astounding. And that's That's just for openers. I mean, that's just, ho-hum, you should have known this already. But he mentions there in verse 14, he says, hearken to this, O Job, stand still, consider the wondrous works of God. There's more information about the construction of this universe in chapters 37 to 41 than in 6,000 years of man investigating it and trying to look out there with Hubble telescopes and whatever, sending out probes. They still are so far behind the Bible. If they just believed the Bible, they'd be so far ahead of the curve, it wouldn't be funny. But instead, they just say, no, if we can't find it out, and they're ever learning, eventually they get there. After they fail and mistaken, and the number of science books and that have been written that are wrong would fill up probably 10,000 dumpsters. And this just goes on and on and on. Eventually they get it right. Eventually they get the math right. But here it is in the Bible, in the oldest book. Something's wrong, people. Well, you know what it is? They cannot stand that a creator did it and told them about it. If it didn't come up, if they didn't work it out on their anvil, if they didn't come up with it, they didn't see it, because they don't believe in the God of this book anyway. Cramps their style. I'll take it from the book, man. I just soon be ahead of all the scientists and the doctors. I don't care who they are. If you believe that book, you're ahead of them. You're way ahead of them. So they won't yield to the scriptures, and therefore they can't know. In verse 15, he says, dost thou know when God disposed them and caused the light of his cloud to shine? And that matches verse 11. And you'll notice there it says, his bright cloud. Now turn to Ezekiel 1:4. This is just not talking about a cloud with a silver lining. Now, you could apply it that way. You can make a general application to it. But it says his cloud. And this brightness, this thing, what we're going to see is that this thing's going to have to do with the second advent. He said in Ezekiel 1:4, and I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north. Now, every time you find that, you'll find that God, or if you check, you'll see that God is in the north. You'll see that Lucifer tried to ascend the sides of the north. Why? Because Mount Zion is a mountain. And you always are ascending no matter which direction you're coming from, and it is directionally north of our universe. You find the North Star, just keep going. Eventually you'll come to a body of water, and if you can get through that body of water and about, 100 million miles of ice, then you're gonna find yourself in the third heaven. Yeah, you got to get by a big red dragon too. Yeah, 7-headed big red dragon. Let's see. I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire unfolding itself, and a brightness was about it. Out of the midst thereof is the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Ezekiel 1:4. The Lord's got stuff going on that's not in our atmosphere. Now, it is a wonder to watch. I love storms. I just love them. Now, I don't care that they're violent against my home, but I personally can watch the most violent of storms and think, wow. To me, it's the power of God. Now, at the same time, I'm begging him not to tear my house down and kill me with lightning. But it's a wonder to me. I think it's amazing. Some people are scared to death of storms. Man, they just go hiding, and dogs hide, everybody hides. But I used as a kid to get right up to the window and watch the lightning till my mom said, you're going to get hit, But this cloud is connected with God himself. And God's not sitting in our atmosphere. He's sitting on a throne in the third heaven. And guess what? There's clouds related to that. So don't limit it to down here. Verse 16. Job 26:9. This is the verse I was telling you about. In fact, I got two verses. I'm ahead of myself. Sorry. Revelation 14:14. It says, and I looked, and behold, a white cloud. Upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. There's Jesus Christ connected with the cloud. And in Job 26:9, it says, he holdeth back the face of his throne and spreadeth his cloud upon it. I have my own theory about that, of why God spread a cloud. First of all, it's God the Father. And God the Father is invisible. He is the invisible God. He's the one you can't see. And the thought of an empty throne probably didn't appeal to him, so I'm going to put something there they can't make an image out of, and it's a cloud enfolding itself. Always changing its look. That's just my idea of it. I thought, well, if there's one thing you could put on there that they couldn't carve out or make a similitude of, is a cloud. And I just think that's why he did that. Just to let somebody know that there's somebody there. Especially when Jesus came down to earth, and if he's not present at the right hand of the Father, then just to let the angels know that the throne is not vacant. I'm still here. Anyway, verse 16. Verse 16, and it says, "Dost thou know the balancing of the clouds and the wondrous works of him which is perfect in knowledge?" And there I am. We can only know some of the wonders with the clouds we can see, and even the ones in space. I didn't realize there was that many clouds in space, but I get one of these channels that gives you all the Hubble telescope pictures. I'm absolutely flabbergasted of how many clouds are out there. I mean, humongous, light years across clouds. And they're there for a purpose. They're there as like a veil. So it's not just in our atmosphere, but far out in space. Then in verse 17, he says, "How thy garments are warm when he quieteth the earth by the south wind." Well, he does mention the earth in this one. And I had to really think about this. I thought, sometimes you read a verse and you're like, I have no clue. I'm not going to have a clue either. But the more I thought about it, and I did a little research, I looked up the south wind. Dr. Ruckman said it's also been called Sirocco. So I said, okay, I'll just run Sirocco and see what I come up with. And when I read what it said about it, the Sirocco wind, and then I said, I think I know what this is about. What happens at a certain time of the year, spring time especially, there is a south wind that blows across the Sahara and meets with the Mediterranean. The moisture from the Mediterranean mixes with that Sahara hot wind and creates this rain. Remember, we've been talking about the former and latter rain? This is the Sirocco wind. This is that south wind. And he says there, I'll get my place here. He says there, he quieteth the earth by the south wind. Well, everything I read about this said it could be hurricane force winds, flooding, and this grit in the air that comes with it can harm machinery. Everything I read about didn't say anything about any quieting anything. But then I thought, the earth is parched, it's cracked, it's dry, it's been without rain for many, many months. And we're talking about this happens, it hits Italy and it hits some of Europe, but it hits Israel. And probably only going to hit Israel near the end of the tribulation. Okay, think about this a second. We're in chapter 37. There's 42 chapters, 42 months of Great Tribulation. Is this the 37th month? That means there's only 5 months to the Advent. Is that enough time to grow back all the vegetation? You better believe it. You get enough rain and you get some hot, humid weather, and you can see a desert sprout and come to life in that much time. It happens all the time in Africa. They'll have a dry spell, and then when the rainy seasons come, man, within a couple months, it's like you can't even make your way through the jungle. It's so thick. So I think this is a reference to the former latter rain that brings that rain and it quiets the ground that is crying for moisture. Okay. Because we know that when he comes back, it says the land is like the Garden of Eden. Now we're talking about in Palestine. The rest of the earth is still suffering a tremendous drought. They are literally dying of thirst after he turns the water to blood and everything like that. It's going to be horrible. And which makes you understand why there may be armies that are trying to take over that area. And especially to get at that Jew, they're already going to have, it's already going to be trodden underfoot of the Gentiles 42 months, but there's a reason why those armies are going to converge. And I think it's it says they're going to fight against the Lord and against His Christ. They're going to fight against the Lord Jesus Christ. That to me sounds so strange, but you know what? They're going to be so deceived, and at that point it really doesn't matter. They might as well fight. Because they've taken the mark of the beast, they're done. Verse 18. Verse 18. Hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong and as a molten looking glass? All right, this is where you got to look beyond above your head. This verse has been construed and interpreted to those who believe in the flat earth that there's a hard dome, okay, either made of ice or something else, over the earth that is only 3,000 or so miles above our head, okay? But we know that when he's talking about the Lord's cloud, he's not talking about something that's just above our atmosphere. We're talking about the third heaven, which is a long way away. The reason why they believe that the dome is just right over the earth is because they've limited a word. He says there, hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong and as a molten looking glass? And everybody says, see, this thing's right above the sky. Well, that's if the word sky only meant what was directly above our head in our atmosphere. But it's got a lot broader meaning than that. Look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 12. Hebrews 11, 12. It says, therefore sprang there even of one, of him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky. Are the stars of the sky in our atmosphere? As many as the stars of the sky, a multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore, innumerable. Then Deuteronomy 33:26. Deuteronomy 33:26. There is none like unto the God of Jeheshurun, who rideth upon the heaven in thy help, and his excellency on the sky. We talk about God there. And what I'm saying is that where God is, okay, there is a hard, molten, frozen firmament where God is. Now, I think God's a little farther than 3,000 miles away. I'll tell you one of the reasons why I don't believe the flat earth thing. I've never believed it anyway, but why I wouldn't even consider it. It limits God's creation to a snow globe. And it ain't. It is, if the firmament declares the glory of God, what happened? If you knew there was only 3,000 miles and then there were just these lights up there, man, you talk about disappointment. Huh? Yeah, the Truman Show. Oh, I hit the dome. Oh. You know, one of the things that with those guys that are flying up there, they're letting everybody go up into space or as close to as they can get. And they're going up there and they're just being wowed. And we'll get into that. One of the things that one of them said about the trip and the pitch darkness that they just couldn't believe. You said, but you got to realize in our Earth there's a glow from the sun hitting the atmosphere and the dispersion of light. We have a certain glow even when we think it's pitch dark. But you get in space, man. You don't know what dark is. And they experience that. And remember, that's why I call it space, because that's what it is. A lot of space. And it is pitch. And we're going to be finding that as we go along here. All right, let me see if I've said everything. Let's see. The other reason is Genesis 1:20. When the Bible talks about our atmosphere, it calls it an open firmament. Now, if there's a dome over it, it wouldn't be open anymore. It'd be a sealed firmament. Listen, that thing up there that God's got below, I mean, he's standing on it. He's sitting on it. His throne is on it. It's what separates, that ice and that water is what separates him from this universe. And it's sealed. Nothing, God can allow nothing out or nothing in. It's at his will. I mean, he has to open a door for anything to come in and come out. I don't think, when he calls the angels and Satan comes also among them, he has to be invited. And that thing is sealed so that water can't go anywhere. He set the bounds of that thing. And of course, he just sets the bounds by his word. And that thing just stays put. It's up there. You think all that water, you think the weight of the ocean is incredible. Imagine the weight of the great deep, which would make, the Pacific and the Atlantic look like just a little cup of water that, look like one of them little things there of our communion table cups compared to what's up there. And yet, God holds that thing into place. And it cannot go beyond what God tells it. It's bound to it. Anyway, let me see here. Yeah, I'm way down here. Okay, good. So Genesis 1:20, I don't know if I read it. And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and the fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. When he mentions a molten looking glass there, molten, the word, let me see, I've got the definition here somewhere. What did I do with it? Okay. I know I got it here somewhere. Anyway, a hard sealed firmament at the very top of the great deep is what that is. He said there in Job 38:30, the waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. It's like glass. And that's exactly what we find in the book of Revelation, that hard firmament is frozen. You say, what temperature? 0 Kelvin. That's is that the third law or the fourth law? Third law of thermodynamics. And it talks about there's a certain temperature where it says where matter crystallizes, it's in a crystalline form, and it's at 0 degrees Kelvin. There's no molecular action. And that's where God is. That means, man, if there's no molecular action, there's not even time there. I don't know what's there. It's beyond, you can't even imagine it. So he says the waters are hid with a stone, the face of the deep is frozen. Revelation 4:6, we're not talking about something above, our atmosphere. It says, Revelation 4:6 says, before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. I thought that was interesting. You threw that in there. Like crystal. You mean a crystalline? You mean 0 degrees Kelvin? Yeah. No molecular action? Yeah. I mean, they've got the laws right. They just don't believe them. Because if you believed in the first, second, and third laws of thermodynamics, you would never believe in evolution. Never. Because you would know that entropy takes place, and in entropy there's not order. There's disorder. There's just chaos. And you can't get this kind of order out there of every living thing without design. You would think anybody could figure that out. Yet people hate God so much they'll believe anything to get away from Him. They don't even like to retain God in their knowledge. Look at Revelation 15:2. Revelation 15:2. I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire. Well, you know what? When something is so cold, when it's at 0 degrees Kelvin, it's hot. I mean, if you've ever had liquid nitrogen, I've had a doctor literally burn me up with liquid nitrogen. I know that stuff burns, and it's cold. He was taking off a few warts and decided to take out his frustration. I don't know who he's mad at, man, but he took it out on me. I come out of there, man, I was like this. On the way home, I was about ready to cry. It hurt so bad. Every knuckle on my hand. I just had little ones here and there. He decided well, let's get them all. And he'd just take that thing and dig that thing into me, man. I feel that, it was so cold, but then I'd feel the burn. And then on the way home, I really felt the burn. My knuckles were just, I thought I was going to lose fingers. Frostbite. Anyway, Sea of glass mingled with fire, and then that had gotten the victory over the beast and over his image, over his mark, over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass having the harps of God. Where are they at? Well, they're in glory. They're not standing on top of a dome above our atmosphere. They're in glory. Verse 22. Verse 22 is going to define, where am I at here? Oh, read down to verse 22. It says, fair weather cometh out of the north. With God is terrible majesty. Now we can make an application to this. You'll notice that when they tell you that something's coming from the south or the west, it can be foul weather. But a lot of times when you get a high pressure system from the north, brings good weather. I'm talking about in seasons like this, spring and summer. I realize you can have a snowstorm and it may come from the north. But when you're talking about the growing seasons and everything, it usually brings a high pressure and it brings good weather. Usually cooler weather, drier weather. Amen? But when he says there about God, with God, guess who else is north? God is north. And it says terrible, what does that say? Verse 22, with God is terrible majesty. Well, we'll get into that. But God is north. Let's see here. Molten, found it. I put it in lettering that is just a fraction high enough I can barely read it. That's the reason I couldn't find it. One of the definitions of the word molten is made by melting and casting in a mold. And he just formed this firmament. Of course, it was water. He put it in a mold. He just fashioned that mold and said, there it is. And next thing you know, it's just frozen solid. And that thing separates, along with all that water, separates God from this universe. But this universe is like a garment to him. We'll get to that because it covers him. Genesis 1 verse 6 and 7 says, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. This is where he divided the waters from the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which are under the firmament from the waters which are above the firmament, and it was so. So when he divided these waters, of course he took the waters that were below the firmament. I don't think it was an equal amount. I think he divided them where he wanted to divide them, and then the ones that were left, I think he pulled them on the earth for our oceans stuff. I think most of this water is above us. Are we in a bubble where it's all around us? I don't know. I kind of don't think so. I don't know why you would have to have water all the way around, because he set. Okay, if we believe that our universe is like a pyramid, because that's what it says. Jesus Christ being the chief cornerstone, and that's the capstone of a pyramid. And if it is a pyramid, he's controlling he just says that's the border there, that's the border there, and that's the border there, and that's the border, and that's it, man. The Word of God controls everything beyond that. And so nothing can go beyond that. Or you say, well, what's beyond that? Well, there's nothing beyond that I can tell. Huh? What's in verse 9? Okay. And God said, let the water under the heaven be gathered together into one place. Well, I was thinking that had to be the earth, and let the dry land appear. Yeah. So I don't necessarily think there's water below us, maybe even to the side, but there definitely where God is, there's where that water is. And I'm sure it's big enough. If you can have a galaxy that expands, 100 light years across, just imagine how big that deep is. And God's got that thing up there, and he molded it himself, and he controls it. Let's see. I'm way behind. I keep going back up to where I shouldn't be. Okay, moving on. Verse 19. I think that's all I needed to say about that. as Forrest Gump would say. We're in verse 19. Teach us what we shall. This is Elihu talking to Job. Teach us what we shall say unto him, for we cannot order our speech by reason of darkness. He's saying, Job, you think, or you keep saying you want to confront God over his treatment of you. No, you don't. That by itself is speech that is darkness. That is, I'm trying to think of the word. I'll think of it here in a minute. It's dark counsel. The fact is, no man can confront God and instruct him about anything. I mean, what are you going to instruct God about? What are you going to tell him about that you know that he doesn't? Our ignorance is as thick as the cloud that shrouds a God and that is light, and in him is no darkness. In other words, as thick as that cloud is that's shrouding him, that's how thick our ignorance is. You know, one of the verses says we see through a glass darkly. I got to thinking about that. That thing is like a sea of glass, and it shrouds God. It's clouds and everything. We just see through it darkly. In other words, this is our glass we're looking through. Now, this is not dark. The darkness is in us. And we can only understand so much. But we can believe it by faith. In Job 38:2, there's the verse that says, who is this that darkeneth? This is what he says to Job. Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? That's not knowing that big picture. That's getting up there and hating what God did to you over something that he did and you didn't even know what his design was. Job, he said, what'd you do? Just get bored one day, decide to throw me to the devil? I mean, that's probably what I would have thought. You getting your kicks here? You having fun? Is there a pool going on among the angels, whether I'm going to make it or not? God says, you have no idea what this is about, do you? This is about the end. And this will be instruction for an entire nation. To even the Gentiles, this will be instruction to them when they're going through the worst suffering of their lives. Job, like us, we don't see it. All we know is how bad we feel. Our little lives, our kingdom measures, however big your house is. And maybe include your yard. That's how big our kingdoms are. But God, man, he sees it all. So when we talk about it, it's dark counsel is what it is. Now, the scriptures teach that, he mentions there by reason of darkness, that God dwells in the thick darkness. And I've always wondered about this. Well, what does that mean? Then said Solomon, the Lord has said that he will dwell in the thick darkness. Then in Job 38:9, it says, when I made the cloud the garment thereof, and the thick darkness a swaddling band for it. The universe is that darkness. It's the garment that he's wearing. It's that thing that shrouds him, man, that nobody can see through the garment to see God. And that's when they stripped Jesus Christ naked on that cross, they didn't realize it, but one day God will strip himself naked. He will take that garment off, and I mean everything explodes into fire. The elements melt with a fervent heat. It says he made the cloud the garment thereof. But this is also connected with the second advent. Joel 2:2 says, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness. What was one of the things that Moses brought on Egypt? Wasn't it 3 days of darkness? Darkness they could feel. That's some real darkness, man, when you can feel it. It's all over me. As I told you about the cave, Mammoth Cave, being in the dark and not even be able to see your hand can be this close, you can't see nothing. You do this, nothing. Pitch darkness. Imagine that kind of darkness that you're in, and then all of a sudden there's a light. You mean like a bright cloud maybe? Something coming at you at tremendous speed and sound, a roaring sound. He's connected with that thing. His second advent's connected with all this. And if this is the 37th month, we're within 5 months of it. Day of darkness, gloominess, day of clouds and thick darkness, as the morning spread upon the mountains. That's the watch he comes in. A great people and a strong, there hath been ever the like, neither shall there be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. That's us coming back. That's the people he's talking about. That's the warriors he's talking about. That's the army he's talking about. It's us. Zephaniah 1:15 says, that day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. So it may be that's one of the ones that are toward the end, or right there at the end, is that darkness cast over the whole earth. He just puts the sun out. Now, I don't know if it's smoke that comes up from that pit. Do you realize what the Lord does to the environmentalist? He torments them for 42 months. He destroys everything. He turns their water to blood, and then he turns their air to smoke. Okay? Don't worry about God. Take care of the environment. You just take care of yourself and your relationship to Him. Don't worry about the rest of it. You say, well, we're wearing out the planet. Yeah, well, He's going to make a new one. So don't worry about it. Manage things. Don't throw your trash out your window. Okay? I mean, have some sense, you know. Don't dump all your insecticide on your garden. Have some sense about what you're doing. And you'll be fine. Just use your bean up here. But God will take care of it. You know what, folks? This is the only planet we got. We've got to kill everybody except for 500,000, or is it 500 million? 500 million. We got to kill everybody except for 500 million. Now, that's Gates. You know, that's the level we need to be at. Well, there's nearly 8 billion people on this planet. That's 7.5 billion people's got to go. And I think Bill Gates ought to be the first. That's the way it should be. But they're talking about, you know, that's the only way we can live on this planet. We're overpopulating. It's just, if you believed in God, you wouldn't give that a second thought. Not even a second thought. God can sustain a universe full of people, and then let it go even beyond that. Okay. He says there in verse 20, shall it be told him that I speak? If a man speaks, surely he shall be swallowed up. He's talking about somebody going in his presence and saying, Elihu wants to speak, and what he wants to say is that, he's going to justify himself. Going before. There's nobody to speak for you. Job, who's going to speak for you? Okay, how many of you can get an audience with Joe Biden? Not that you want to, but how many of you could get an audience with Joe Biden, I don't know, within a week? You couldn't. How about the Queen of England? Any premier anywhere. Can you book the date? Can you have lunch tomorrow? Well, how do you think you're going to get an audience with God? He's saying you can't get a personal audience with a king or a president or a king. How do you think you're going to get an audience with God to run your mouth in front of a holy God? You know what? If you did, your very words would be your undoing. Job realizes that at the end. You do know that. By the time God's done with him, with God's word, he realizes just how wrong he is. Not that he's wrong with his friends or Elihu. He's wrong about God. The Bible says, by thy words shalt thou be justified, and by thy words shalt thou be condemned. You know what words will justify you? When you receive, and when you call on, and when you believe, when you confess Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. That'll save you. Anything short of that, every word you ever spoke will damn you. But isn't it odd? Isn't it odd that the work of Jesus Christ at Calvary produced this very thing that Elihu says that Job doesn't have, that you and I have, and that is somebody that goes in our place. Romans chapter 8, verse 26 and 27. It says, likewise the Spirit also helpeth our infirmities, for we know not what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit itself maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. And he that searcheth the hearts knoweth what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for the saints according to the will of God. You see, we've got somebody in our court. Not just the Lord Jesus Christ as our advocate at the right hand of the Father, but we also have the Holy Spirit that's going in, that's taking our prayers right into the throne room. Now, he does sometimes change those prayers around a little bit. Well, it's just diplomatic relation. I mean, you just got to, diplomacy here. He's not going to say something to God and he says, man, I'm not telling the Lord that, but I'll tell him this, Lord, could you kind of slack up on me? He wants you to be more strict with him, Lord, or something like that. It says groanings which cannot be uttered. I didn't think it's groanings that you don't want to utter. And not that you cannot utter them, but anyway. Then he says there in verse 21 and 22, and now men see not the bright light which is in the clouds. We see silver linings all the time. But the wind passeth and cleanseth them. Fair weather cometh out of the north, with God is terrible majesty. Okay. But notice it says, and now men see not the bright light which is in the clouds. But one day they will. One day he's coming. What is he coming with? Clouds. And you know what's you're going to see behind that cloud? A bright, bright light. And they're going to see it. Few verses, or one verse here, Psalm 75, 6 and 7, talks about God's direction. It says, for promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but God is judge. Now you know which one he replaced. North. But God is the judge. He putteth down one and he setteth up another. Now I'm going to make a prediction. Okay? Russia will defeat Ukraine. You say, why? They're north. Who won the Civil War? Who won the Vietnam War and shouldn't have? You'll find out that many times, man, the northern one wins over the southern because God said it so, because he's north of all of them. Just telling you. We don't want to get into a fight with Russia. They're north. We're in the west, but we're more south. We don't want to try to do that. But if I had to pick a winner, North Korea, South Korea, who won and shouldn't have? Think about it. Always north. The direction in the Bible is you always want to travel east to west. When they left the garden, they went west to east. So you'll find out that west to east is the bad direction. But when it comes to north and south, it seems like when you have and I don't know if it's 100%, but when you have military engagements going on, or when nations fight against nations, it seems like the north always pulls it out. Even though they could be the weaker one, even though they could be on the run. I mean, we pulled out of Vietnam and we literally won that war. But Walter Cronkite said we didn't. So we went home. And we certainly could have won Korea. But they pulled back. Now we had an armistice with them, but we didn't win it. They kind of won the day. Anyway, beyond that. Fair weather cometh out of the north, with God this terrible majesty. So I already talked about that. Good weather comes out of the north usually. But this is in reference to God. And that terrible majesty there, it's the power. It's God's power and might, and the fact that he is bringing it with him. Judgment. The word terrible, you get the word terrifying. I think it even calls him a terrible God. But it's not in the sense that we know. Terrible is that he's terrifying. And when he comes back, it'll be truly terrifying to anyone on this earth. Verse 23 and 24, touching the Almighty, we cannot find him out. He is excellent in power and in judgment and plenty of justice. He will not afflict. Men do therefore fear him. He respecteth not any that are wise of heart. In other words, if you're a wisecracker, he's got nothing for you. He doesn't respect anybody that thinks they're smarter than he is or thinks they can correct his book. So that goes for the scientist that thinks the Bible is wrong when it's never been wrong. That goes for the Bible corrector that thinks the Bible is wrong and it's never been wrong. Not this Bible. And this is another verse. It says, where touching the Almighty, we cannot find him out. Ecclesiastes states this in another way. It says, he hath made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he has set the world in their hearts so that no man can find out the work of God, the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. Have you ever heard how many different hypotheses is on the time frame? I mean, it started out as a few 100 million years, then it went to 1 billion, then 2 billion, then 20 billion, and I mean, they just keep jumping around with these numbers like they're, I don't know what it is. And none of them knows the future, do they? I do. I got a book that tells me about it. And no man that rejects this book can know the beginning from the end. And he'll never find God's signature on anything. Although you and I see it all over the place. We see it in science, we see it in the clouds, we see it in the heavens, we see it in the sun, we see it in the stars, we see it on the earth, we see it in the animals, we see it in the flowers, we see it in everything. Because we believe him. They don't see him at all, and they never will. That's another reason why I reject anything about the flat earth, is because if everything else is a sphere out there, I mean, I can see the moon with a pair of binoculars and tell you that it's a sphere. I can see it going around, okay? The other thing is, if everything out there is a sphere and we're sitting on something that's flat, or it even has foundations under it, like a table, don't you think that's a signature? Well, how is it NASA knows it, but you don't? How is it there are government agencies out there that know the signature of God, but you don't? That's crazy. They don't know. That's why they keep looking. That's why they're sending it out there. They're really going out there. But they're not going to make it anywhere near out of our neighborhood before it's all over. And so what if they make it to Mars? Good luck with that planet. Listen, when man fell in the garden, God just let everything go. He just said, and I mean everything is just, he said, well, there's water on Mars. There may have been waterfalls on Mars. It might have been a Garden of Eden. I don't know. But all I know is this. God ain't putting no energy into it now because nobody's going to be dwelling there. Nobody alive is going to be dwelling there. They might lay in there, but they won't live too long probably. It says, he hath made everything beautiful in his time. He hath set the world in their hearts so that no man can find out the work of God, the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. And they don't. They don't know the beginning from the end. They have no idea. Only you know that because you believe what God says. All right. Any questions about what we covered? Okay. Chapter 38 should prove very good. I'm excited about that. All right. You all ready for the Lord's Supper tonight?